My name is Sean Camacho. I am a managing associate in the litigation practice group. My practice focuses on complex civil litigation and government contracts litigation. And then I am a veteran. I am a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force Reserves. I've served 16 years, and during that time, I've deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, East Africa, Colombia, and Kuwait. And in 2013, I left active duty, used my post 9/11 GI Bill to go to law school. And it was one of the best decisions I could have ever made.
My name is Scott Applegate. I am the Denton's Global Cybersecurity Incident Response Manager. I currently run a team of 5 that assists the firm with cybersecurity operations, things like incident response, vulnerability management, and cyber threat intelligence. Prior to Denton's, I spent 28 years in the United States Army as an intelligence analyst, a communications officer, and a cyber operations officer. I served in both the Persian Gulf War and Iraqi freedom. And on the side, I'm also an adjunct professor at Georgetown.
Hi, my name is Sam Maisel. I'm a partner in the Los Angeles office of Denton's, and I am in the bankruptcy, restructuring, and insolvency group, focusing primarily on distressed healthcare. As my veteran experience was that I am a West Point grad. I then served 5 years as an infantry officer, airborne ranger qualified, served in the 101st Airborne Division, and then in the 3rd U.S. Infantry, the Old Guard in Washington, D.C. Then the Army sent me to law school, where I went to George Washington University, interned in the Reagan White House, then spent 4 years in Germany as an Army lawyer, primarily with the 3rd Armored Division. And then I spent a year in the Middle East as one of the senior defense counsel in Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm. So Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Kuwait, 1990 to 91. Then got out of active duty, spent 5 years in the reserve, left the reserves as a lieutenant colonel in 97. And so that's me at Denton's and me as a veteran.
I am an Air Force veteran. While I was in the Air Force, I was part of the Services Squadron. The Services Squadron, they do a lot of different things around the base, but primarily I was a cook. That has nothing to do with what I do with Denton's right now, but I love to cook. So it was a really good time. I really enjoyed it.
I was born in a small town in Minnesota and grew up in Austin, Minnesota. I graduated from Yale College and Harvard Law School. After law school, I was drafted in the Army and went in the Army the weekend of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Everybody was terrified. You can't believe how tense those days were. I went through basic training, then took a commission in the Judge Advocate General's Corps. And among other things, I was the chief of the Soldiers Advocate Division at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, where we provided defense and legal assistance for that post. There were some 50,000 troops and Department of Army civilians on that post. So we were very busy.
I'm a partner at Denton's. I joined the firm in 1981 as a first-year associate, became partner in 1988, was the chair of the corporate group from 1998 to 2002, and started Denton's Technology and Outsourcing practice, which was at one point the leading service provider side practice in the country. My role as a veteran is simply to be one. I joined the Army when I was admitted to West Point in 1969, graduated in 73. From 73 to 76, I was a company grade field artillery officer in Fort Lewis, but with assignments around the Western United States from Alaska to California. In 76, I deployed to Italy and joined first as the executive officer and then as the commander of a tactical nuclear weapons unit in the Italian Alps. I left the Army in 1978 to go to the University of Minnesota for law school. I joined the Minnesota National Guard, where I commanded a 155 millimeter field artillery battery on the Minnesota-South Dakota border. We used to joke that we were there to protect Minnesotans from South Dakotans, but that was never really an issue. I was not involved with the military at all from the time I got out of the National Guard until 2001, when after September 11th, I joined the board of the USO of Illinois. I served on the board for 20 some years. I'm still on the board, and I was chairman and CEO from 2008 to 2010. And from 2006 to 2012, I was the president of the West Point Society of Chicago.
I'm a partner in the Kansas City office in the labor and employment and litigation groups. I joined the firm in 2013 after being with another firm here in town. My military service, I was in the Marines from 1999 to 2005, initially during college and law school, and then I was activated during the Iraq War.
Now, I've worked here in Chicago for about 7 years. I've been in records for over 21 years, different firms. And in the military, I worked in military intelligence, and then actually worked with the NSA at that time.
I'm Bob Schuda. I'm a partner in the Los Angeles office of Denton's US LLP. I'm a veteran of the United States Coast Guard. I'm a graduate of the United States Coast Guard Academy, class of 1985. As a Coast Guardsman, I had the opportunity to sail all over the Western Hemisphere, and I conducted operations in national defense, law enforcement, narcotics interdiction, life-saving, search and rescue, and marine environmental protection. Now, nearly 20 years later, I'm an environmental attorney with Denton's.
I'm a managing associate in the IP group here at Denton's. I'm a patent attorney. And on the veteran side of things, I was a civil engineer with the Air Force, and actually still am with the Colorado Air National Guard.
Well, I commemorate Veterans Day by remembering my veteran service and remembering my friends who didn't make it. I remember the people that made the ultimate sacrifice.
I usually start by wearing a poppy on my lapel pin for the entire month of November.
I told you that I was for 2 years the chairman and the CEO of the USO of Illinois, and in that role, I typically went out the week before and a few days after Veterans Day delivering speeches to veterans organizations or delivering speeches at events that were intended to honor veterans.
I put on my Marine Corps Marathon sweatshirt. I had the opportunity to run a couple of Marine Corps marathons while I was in the service. I go to Mass. I try to go to a local Veterans Day ceremony. I fly the national ensign, and I always try to read or watch something about U.S. military history.
Mostly by recognizing the other veterans who either served alongside of me or in my case, actually served in Iraq. I managed to avoid Iraq by going to the Philippines. And so I know what the veterans in my generation went through in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I mostly want to recognize those individuals more than myself.
I still have a lot of friends and classmates from the Air Force Academy that are serving active duty. So every year I make sure I connect with them just to say hi and check in with them and their families. And mainly to say thank you because they are doing the job every day. So I find that incredibly rewarding and just a great opportunity to connect with people I really care about.
Well, I mean, I joined the Army 2 weeks after graduating from high school. So 18 years old, pretty adaptable. It was something I always wanted to do from the time I was a small boy. And I remember just thinking it's harder than I thought it would be, but it's even more satisfying than I thought it would be.
I just like the first experience I had, the first day, I cried. I was only 17, but it wasn't too hard because my family's a military family. So my dad was really on us strict time-wise and keeping things in order. So actually that was pretty easy.
There are some things that I learned in military life. The first was that harassment and criticism aren't personal. They're intended to make you stronger and they're intended to make you better.
It's definitely different than civilian life because you're not in control of your day-to-day actions per se.
Well, there's so many, but I think one thing that jumps out in particular is waking up early. I think ever since I was 18 years old and first started in the military, waking up early was just something that you did.
When I reported aboard the Coast Guard Academy in 1981 now, more than 40 years ago, what I remember is a pretty quick, busy and intense summer of physical and mental training that transitioned into 4 years of academic and military study.
The ability to take care of a lot of things on your own, doesn't matter the problems, even here at work. You see a situation, you're able to adapt to it.
I credit the military, I credit the Air Force for making me independent and being able to get up, because I've moved 4 or 5 times in my life. I have no problem getting up and moving and going places because I did that in the service. So it taught me how to be very independent, how to take care of myself.
As far as what I learned about myself, I think it would primarily be that teamwork is a critical thing to rely on. It's not just a phrase.
First of all, you get perspective, right? So when people talk about how hard what we do is, or how long the hours are, or that they have to travel, I compare it to walking foot patrols in Afghanistan in the mountains, and I think this isn't so bad.
The sacrifices. Many people don't realize it. I gave up the opportunity to go to college. I did have a couple scholarships, but things worked out where I didn't take them.
The sad thing about military service today is a small percentage of people who serve in the military. So it's an isolated community. People don't appreciate the sacrifice that these folks make, the sacrifice for them and their families.
I think one thing is, if you serve in the military, you can be stereotyped. I think people think there's only a certain type of person that serves in the military, and I just found that not to be true. Military members come from all walks of life. They're super creative. They're just patriotic people that want to do great things for their country. I think there's a spirit of creativity and entrepreneurship and teamwork that I think all military members have. And I don't think civilians fully understand that piece of it.
For most of us, for most veterans, being a veteran is a quiet privilege. We're not looking for others to come up and thank us. We look at our service as something we were privileged to do. And the nicest change that I've seen is the change in the public perception of the military.
Everybody, as soon as I say Air Force, everyone always thinks they're flying planes and they're shooting people. And that does happen, but that's not really the crust of it. For me, it was really community and family, because I spent a lot of times, majority of my time of service, I was overseas. So when you're overseas and you're in a country in a language and you don't speak the language, you bond together. So that's really what it's about. And the Air Force is really about community and family. It was very important.
Well, the military is really a cross-section of the American culture and the American population. So there are liberals, conservatives, independents, there are Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, atheists, agnostics, there are gay, straight, bi, trans service members. And yet we're all able to work together to solve really challenging problems under what are often very harsh conditions. And that's because at the very basis of it all, we respect each other as service members. We have that common bond together. And so regardless of the fact that we might have different opinions on things, we can still be one team and serve the country in that way. And I kind of wish a lot of Americans felt that way about their fellow Americans now.
I would say, given that I'm a parent of a soon-to-be college-age child, that there are a lot of opportunities there in the military, and that it provides an alternative path maybe to what has become the traditional path of college.
My favorite question. So, Denton's is the biggest and the best flower farm, and of course the Air Force is the best branch. I don't care what anybody says. So it's very much the same kind of thing. Have very high standards, very high expectations, and you're expected to be able to say and do certain things and carry yourself in a particular way. And Denton's is the exact same way. So it's like being at home for me.
Well, again, I thank Denton's, and I think it's great that Denton's takes time to recognize its veterans. I always felt welcome, going all the way back to McKenna and Cuneo as a veteran. And serving in the armed forces, I think, and serving as an officer of the court, which we do at Denton's, are two types of ways that we can fulfill our civic duty. So the life is very consistent.
Has done a good job of recognizing veterans and other groups. So that's nice to know you're with an organization that values that.
I think it's great. Denton's has a great veterans affinity group, and there's multiple members. It seems like in every office that are either currently serving or veterans, And I think it's been a great experience.
And obviously, the Veterans Affinity Group overlaps with virtually all the other groups, right? Because you could be a gay veteran, you could be a Black veteran, you could be Asian American veteran. So we like to think we cross all the other affinity group lines. And so, and I appreciate Denton's recognizing the Veterans Affinity Group, and hopefully we can do more with that program in the coming year.
Well, working at Denton's as a veteran is great because I got a lot of management experience in the Army. I've been in management in the Army. I managed I was in management of the law firm I previously was with. I was the founding managing partner of our Kansas City Denton's office when it was Sunshine, and managed that office and grew it from 2 to about 50 lawyers. I think my position is president of the Kansas City Metropolitan Bar Association and founding president of the Kansas City Metropolitan Bar Foundation. All those leadership roles I attribute in part to what I learned from my experience in the military.
Most people don't realize it, but the military is really a pretty progressive organization. So coming into Denton's and finding a corporate culture that really embraces diversity and multiculturalism was a pleasant surprise for me. You know, to me, Denton's is a company with a very strong moral center, and working for a company like that is very important to me as both a person and as a veteran who spent a large chunk of his life in service of our nation.